The Illinois tribes live in what are now Wisconsin and Iowa, and in parts of Missouri and Arkansas, in addition to Illinois. They built their villages along major rivers. In the summer, they lived in large rectangular houses called longhouses. Longhouses were usually shared by 6 to 10 families. The longhouses were located in the larger, more permanent villages where the Illinois tribes farmed. In the winter, the Illinois split into similar groups for hunting and set up smaller villages. Their winter villages had dome-shaped houses called wigwams. Wigwams were smaller and could be moved more easily. The Illinois grew corn and other crops. They also hunted bison. The Illinois worshipped a supreme being called the Master of Life. They also believed in spirits called Manitou, which could take the form of animals or birds. The Illinois were not the only Native Americans who lived in the state named for them. The Miami lived in northern Illinois, near Lake Michigan. Around 1650, Iroquois people began invading Illinois. At the top of the page, please point to the longhouse and see if you can find it. The Illinois tribe lived in the longhouses, which are to the left, in the summer, and wigwams, to the right, in the winter. Both types of house were made of wood poles covered with layers of woven mats. Longhouses were divided into rooms with a fire pit for each family. Point to the picture of Starved Rock. Starved Rock is a 130-foot or 40-meter cliff that towers over the Illinois River. According to legend, a group of Illinois were trapped atop the rock by the attack of a neighboring tribe. The Illinois were surrounded, and many starved to death there. The Iroquois were among the most feared of the Native American nations. They traded with English and Dutch settlers in New York for guns. They sometimes used those guns to fight other tribes. The Iroquois knew Illinois had many beavers. Beaver pelts were valuable trade items. Iroquois war parties began attacking the Illinois people. In the late 1600s, other tribes moved into Illinois as well. These included the Sauk, Fox, Winnebago, Potawatomi, Kickapoo, and Shawnee. French explorers. Around the same time, another group of people came to Illinois territory. One day in 1673, 2 men walked into an Illinois tribal village near present-day Keokuk, Iowa. The 2 men were unlike any the Illinois had seen before. Their names were Father Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet. They were probably the first Frenchmen the Illinois had ever met. Marquette and Joliet were in the middle of a long journey down the Mississippi River. Point to the picture and read the caption above. After his trip through Illinois, Marquette wrote an account of the voyage. His journals helped historians form a clear picture of early French activities in the Illinois region. Their goals were to convert Native Americans they met to Christianity and extend France's empire in North America. They wanted to use the Mississippi River as a highway to carry furs from the middle of North America to the Great Lakes. From there, they could reach French settlements in Canada and eventually make their way to Europe. Marquette and Joliet quickly made friends with the Illinois people. The Native Americans told the explorers about a shortcut through the Illinois country. Marquette and Joliet followed the shortcut on their return trip. It took them past the place where Chicago would one day rise. Another French explorer, René Robert Cavelier, Sieur de La Salle, built a fort along the route Marquette and Joliet had followed. It was located near present-day Peoria. People of the Illinois nation gathered there to trade with the French. They also looked to the French for protection. Like the Illinois, the French considered the Iroquois a threat. La Salle became friends with the Illinois and promised to protect them. Over the next 100 years, the French built forts and cities along the rivers of Illinois. Point to the map of the French exploration route. See if you and your partner can trace the arrows to follow Joliet and Marquette's route with the red arrow and Sieur de La Salle's route with the green. The towns of Kaskaskia and Cahokia in southern Illinois were started as French trading posts or missions. They were to be part of a string of French strongholds along the Mississippi and Illinois rivers. The French dream of an empire did not last. France was defeated in the French and Indian War with Great Britain, which took place from 1754 to 1763. France had to give up its North American possessions. In 1765, British troops raised the British flag over Illinois. Point to the picture of La Salle at the top of the page. LaSalle failed in an attempt to return to the mouths of the Mississippi River and was murdered by members of his crew in 1687. Point to the fact box about life in French Illinois. Most French villages in Illinois grew up around Catholic missions. Religion was the center of village life. French priests taught the children of the village and led daily religious services. The French celebrated 27 religious holidays each year. Most of the villagers were named for saints. Each person celebrated his or her saint's feast day once a year instead of his or her own birthday. The French lived in houses made of logs stuck upright in the ground. The gaps between the logs were filled with a mixture of clay and grass. A wooden porch often extended all the way around the house. French villages included not only French people, but also Native Americans and African slaves. In 1720, the first African slaves were brought to Illinois to work on French farms. The French required slaveholders to educate their slaves and baptize them in the Catholic religion. Slaves lived in separate houses near their owner's house. Native Americans traded with French villagers and sometimes took religious lessons from French priests. French men outnumbered French women in Illinois. Some French men married Native American women. Children in the French villages were expected to grow up quickly. When a boy turned 12, he was considered old enough to carry a gun and defend the settlement. When a girl turned 12, she was considered old enough to marry. The American Revolution. The British had little interest in Illinois because it was far from their colonies along the Atlantic Ocean. When those colonies declared their independence in 1776, the British had very few troops in Illinois. Most of the fighting in the American Revolutionary War, which took place from 1775 to 1783, happened far to the east. However, one important campaign brought the Revolution to Illinois. In 1778, a Virginian named George Rogers Clark led 175 volunteers to capture British forts in Illinois. Striking quickly and by surprise, Clark's troops captured Kaskaskia and surrounding towns in southern Illinois. Then, Clark led his men on a daring attack on British troops at Vincennes, which is now Indiana. His victory there meant that Illinois would one day become part of the United States. Point to the picture of George Rogers Clark, where he is in Kentucky in 1778 to take Kaskaskia from the British. He then led a small force across rough winter terrain to capture Vincennes, Indiana. Point to the Liberty Bell at the top of the page. This is the Liberty Bell of the West. After George Rogers Clark captured Kaskaskia, the townspeople rang their village church bell in celebration. The date was July 4th, 1778, the second anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The bell, to the right, became known as the Liberty Bell of the West.